They said she vanished on a rainy night. But the truth is, the house never let her leave. Every window remembers her breath. Every floorboard keeps her name. And when the wind moves just right, you can still hear her steps. Coming down the hall, slowly, patiently, home again. It rained for 3 nights before she arrived. The kind of rain that drowns time itself, slow, deliberate, endless. The old house sat alone at the end of the dirt road, the light in its attic trembling with each gust, as though it feared the dark outside more than the silence within. The porch groaned beneath her weight. Wet wood, swollen from years of waiting, sighed under every step she took. Inside, the air tasted of dust and forgotten prayers. The kind that cling to walls after too many goodbyes. Somewhere upstairs, something moved, softly, like fabric brushing against a doorframe. She froze, the echo of her heartbeat lost beneath the whisper of rain. Then, the floorboards answered. One creak. Then another. As if the house had just remembered she was home. The rain had already begun by the time Elara reached the end of the road, soft and endless, the kind that blurs the edges of everything until the world feels like it's breathing in mist. The headlights cut through it weakly, slicing only enough light to reveal the winding path ahead, wet gravel, skeletal trees bowing under the weight of the weather, and beyond them, the outline of the house that waited like something half awake. Her mother's house. Her house once, though it hadn't felt like home in decades. It stood alone at the end of the lane, its windows dull and black as eyes that had seen too much and refused to blink again. The roof sagged slightly at the corners, the porch tilting forward like it was whispering something it didn't want anyone else to hear. Elara parked on the edge of the drive and just sat there for a moment, her fingers tight around the steering wheel. The rain against the windshield sounded like distant applause. Or warning. She wasn't sure which. The air was colder when she stepped out. It clung to her, heavy with the scent of wet soil and rust, a memory of earth that hadn't been disturbed in a long time. Her boots sank slightly into the mud, the sound swallowed by the hush that only falling rain can make. The world felt emptied out, like the night had drawn itself tight around her. There were no lights on inside the house. She hadn't expected any, but still, the darkness behind those windows carried weight, a kind of watchfulness. As if something was waiting for her to turn the key. When she reached the porch, the first step gave a low moan under her weight. The sound traveled up through the wood, through her legs, through her ribs, like the house was remembering her. The key slid into the lock easily, though the metal was cold and slick. The door resisted for a moment, swollen from the damp, then opened with a sigh that seemed too human. The smell came next, old fabric, rot, and something faintly sweet underneath, like dried flowers left too long in water. Her mother had always loved flowers. They were everywhere once. Elara stepped inside, careful not to look at the shadows yet. The light from outside barely reached past the threshold, spilling across the warped wooden floor. Dust moved in the air like slow snow, disturbed by her arrival. The silence inside wasn't empty, it was full of tiny sounds, the drip of water from the eaves, the distant creak of timber shifting in its age, the whisper of wind pressing through cracks in the windows. She felt the temperature drop as the door closed behind her, sealing her into the airless quiet. For a moment, she just listened. It was strange how a house could remember sound, as though if she stood there long enough, she might hear her mother's footsteps again, her voice calling from the kitchen, the clatter of dishes from another time. But all she heard was rain. The living room was exactly as she remembered it, only smaller. Grayer. The wallpaper had peeled in long curls, revealing the darker wood beneath. The old clock on the mantel had stopped, maybe years ago, its hands frozen at 3:17. She couldn't remember if that time meant something. On the table, beneath a thick film of dust, sat a photograph frame turned face down. She hesitated, then picked it up. A faint shape stared back from beneath the glass, her mother's smile, faded and blurred by moisture. The corner of the picture had begun to rot, the faces softening into shadows. Ilara placed it back where it had been and kept moving, slow and deliberate, the boards complaining softly beneath each step. In the kitchen, the ceiling had begun to sag. A water stain spread like an ink blot across it, dripping faintly onto the counter. There was still a cup beside the sink, rim chipped, the stain of old coffee etched into its porcelain. It felt wrong, untouched, as though her mother had only just stepped out and forgotten to clean up. But her mother had been gone for weeks. Found alone in another house, a rented room in the city, her heart simply stopped, the coroner said. No signs of struggle. No witnesses. Just silence. Ilara had delayed the return for as long as she could. She wasn't sure why she came back at all. Closure, maybe. Guilt. The kind that lingers behind grief, turning over and over in the dark like something that can't die. A door slammed softly somewhere above her. Not sharp, not sudden, just the sound of movement, of something giving way in the air. The second floor. Ilara's eyes flicked upward, to the ceiling, tracing the faint line of dust that drifted down. She told herself it was just the wind. Houses like this always shifted when it rained. The wood swelled, doors swayed, windows sighed in their frames. But the stillness after that sound felt different, deliberate. Like a pause between breaths. She found the staircase half covered by a sheet that had once been white. When she brushed it aside, the dust rose in a quiet cloud. The banister felt slick beneath her hand. The first step creaked louder than she expected. The second barely made a sound. By the third, she was holding her breath without realizing it. Halfway up, she looked back toward the door. It was still open, just a crack, the rain shimmering beyond it like a curtain of silver. The sound of it should have been comforting, but it only deepened the quiet inside, made every sound she made feel too loud. At the top, the hallway stretched out, dim and narrow. The air was colder here. She could see her breath, faint, rising like smoke. Doors lined the corridor, all closed except one, the room at the far end, her mother's old bedroom. The door was open just enough for the darkness inside to spill out across the floor, thick and still. She didn't want to go in yet. Not tonight. She turned toward her own old room instead. The handle turned smoothly. Inside, the air smelled like paper and dust and faintly of lavender. The window was cracked open, letting in a thin ribbon of rain. The sound of it filled the room softly, rhythmic, hypnotic. Her childhood bed still stood against the far wall. The quilt was folded neatly, though she couldn't imagine who would have done that. On the desk, a single candle sat beside a small stack of letters tied with string. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded. She reached for the top one but stopped halfway, her hand suspended in the air. She could feel it then, that faint sense of being watched. Not from the door. Not from the window. From within the room itself, like the air had shifted to make space for something else. She turned slowly, scanning the shadows that gathered in the corners. Nothing moved. But the feeling didn't fade. It deepened, like a breath drawn in and never let out. Ilara set her bag down on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. The frame groaned beneath her, a low, tired sound. She could hear the rain more clearly now, tapping the glass in uneven rhythms, like fingers against a door. Her shoulders ached with the weight of memory, the kind that never truly left, it only waited, quiet and patient, for nights like this. She closed her eyes and listened. The rain. The creaks. The hum of silence filling every corner of the house. Then, faintly, beneath it all, a whisper. So soft she might have imagined it. But it came again, threaded through the sound of rain. A woman's voice. Her name. Ilara. Her eyes opened, slow, unsure. The window rattled gently. The candle flickered though she hadn't lit it. The air shifted again, colder, heavier. The house seemed to exhale around her, the boards beneath her feet flexing as though something had begun to move below. And for the first time since she'd arrived, she realized the rain had stopped. The world outside had gone completely still. The morning came pale and cold, the kind that never really feels like morning at all. The light was thin, almost gray, filtered through a sky that hadn't decided whether it wanted to rain again or hold its breath. Elara sat at the small kitchen table, a chipped mug between her hands, steam rising in lazy swirls from the coffee she wasn't drinking. The house was quieter in daylight, but not peaceful, just quieter in the way a held breath is quiet. She could still hear the faint ticking of the clock that no longer worked, the steady drip of water from the cracked ceiling into a metal bowl she'd found beneath the sink, and the distant complaint of wood as the structure adjusted itself to the chill. Somewhere behind it all, beneath it, something else seemed to pulse softly, an undercurrent of sound too faint to name. She had slept badly, if she had slept at all. The night had been a blur of half-dreams and small noises, the kind that wake you without reason, a sigh from the corner, the soft shuffle of something moving just beyond sight. Each time she opened her eyes, the dark seemed thicker, more intent. Once, she could have sworn she saw the candle on her desk flicker though she hadn't lit it. But by morning, the world felt solid again. Real. Almost. The task ahead was simple, or so she told herself. Sort through the boxes. Decide what to keep. Throw the rest away. Her mother's solicitor would come in a few days to finalize the sale of the property. Until then, she'd stay here, just long enough to finish what was left. But as she moved through the rooms, the weight of years pressed close. The air felt different in every corner, heavier in some places, almost breathable in others. In the living room, dust shimmered through the weak light, moving like drifting ash. She began with the cabinets, old photo albums, yellowed papers, small relics of lives that had already ended. There were letters she didn't recognize, receipts for furniture that was long gone, brittle newspaper clippings folded into forgotten books. The smell of mildew clung to everything. She worked slowly, careful not to disturb more than she had to, though she wasn't sure why. It was just a house. But each object she touched seemed to hum faintly with memory, as if the walls were still listening. By noon, the rain had started again, gentle at first, then steady, threading itself through the silence. It was almost comforting, the rhythm of it against the glass, the faint rumble of thunder far away. She found herself standing by the old fireplace, running her fingers along the edge of the mantel where the family photographs used to sit. Her father's face, her mother's, her own as a child, frozen smiles under glass. They were gone now. She remembered packing them years ago, before everything fell apart. But as she turned, something caught her eye on the far side of the room, half buried beneath a pile of old linens. It was a wooden box, small and square, the kind used to store keepsakes or letters. The lid was warped slightly from dampness. She knelt beside it, brushed away the dust, and lifted it open. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, stacked loosely together without frames. She expected to see her mother's familiar handwriting on the backs, dates, places, names, but they were blank. Most of the photos were ordinary, birthdays, picnics, family gatherings. She recognized the living room as it once was, brighter, full of flowers. Her father's arm around her mother's shoulder, the faded image of a birthday cake glowing with candles. And there she was, small, maybe 6 or 7, caught mid-laugh. But in the next photo, she noticed something odd. A figure stood behind her, just at the edge of the frame, a child, slightly older, with the same hair, the same eyes. It looked like her, almost perfectly, except for the expression. While Elara was smiling, the other girl was not. Her mouth was pressed into a thin, uncertain line, her gaze unfocused, as if she were looking not at the camera but through it. Elara frowned, turning the photo in her hands. The paper was slightly damp, cool to the touch. She sifted through the rest of the stack, her movements slowing with each image. The same girl appeared again and again, at different ages, in different places, always beside her, always close, but never smiling. Sometimes she stood half hidden behind furniture or curtains, sometimes by the window, face turned toward the light. In one photo, she sat beside Elara at the kitchen table, their hands nearly touching, though the shadow between them seemed darker, thicker. She tried to remember. There had been no other children in the house, no cousins who stayed long enough for pictures. Her mother had never mentioned anyone like this. But the resemblance was undeniable. It wasn't just similarity, it was replication. Her eyes, her shape, even the small scar on her chin she'd gotten falling off a swing. Except in the photos, the scar was missing. The air in the room shifted. The rain outside grew heavier, pressing against the glass in waves. Somewhere behind her, a floorboard gave a long, drawn-out creak, like something adjusting its weight. Elara froze, the photo still in her hand. The sound came again, closer this time, then stopped. She turned toward the doorway. Nothing there. Only the steady hum of rain and the faint flicker of movement from the curtains. She tried to shake the feeling, returning her attention to the photos, though her fingers trembled slightly now. The last image in the box was older than the rest, the edges frayed. It showed the house from outside, the garden wild and overgrown, the front door open. Standing on the porch were two small figures, identical in height, both looking straight at the camera. The print had faded so much that their faces were little more than pale smudges, but even through the blur, she could see the outline of her mother behind them, her expression unreadable. A drop of water fell onto the image. Elara looked up. The ceiling above her was dry. Another drop followed, landing beside her knee. She reached out, palm up, and felt nothing. But the next one hit her skin, cold as glass. She stood quickly, the box falling shut. The light from the window seemed to dim for a moment, then returned, weaker. She could smell something new now, a faint trace of smoke, maybe, or damp fabric left too long in the dark. It filled her lungs slowly, heavy, familiar. She took the photos to the table, laying them out one by one under the light. The resemblance was unbearable. It wasn't imagination. It couldn't be. Each face, each angle, each repetition of herself. The girl who shouldn't exist. Outside, the wind had begun to rise, the trees bending under it. The window rattled softly in its frame. She leaned closer to the photographs, her breath clouding faintly against the glass. In the reflection of the window above the table, for just a second, she thought she saw two figures standing there, her own shape, and another behind it, slightly offset. She turned, heart caught in her throat. The room was empty. Only the chair she'd left pushed out, the curtain swaying gently from the draft. She sat back down, hands flat against the table, the photographs spread before her like evidence from a dream. A low hum filled her ears, rising and falling with the rhythm of her pulse. Somewhere in the walls, something creaked again, slow and deliberate, as though answering the silence. The candle on the desk flickered once, though she hadn't touched it. The faint scent of burnt wax drifted through the air. She looked up, and in the dim reflection of the window, her face stared back at her, calm, expressionless. And just behind it, barely visible in the glass, another set of eyes blinked at the same time. Then the reflection steadied. Only her. Only the room. Only the rain. Elara's gaze dropped once more to the final photograph, the one with the two little girls standing side by side, the door open behind them. And for the first time, she noticed something she hadn't before. The shadow cast on the porch was not two figures, but one. The storm arrived with night, as if the darkness itself had called it back. By the time the first thunder rolled, Elara had already lit the oil lamp in the hallway, its trembling flame painting the walls with restless shadows. The house felt heavier under the weight of rain, each drop against the windows a soft reminder of distance, of time that no longer moved the same way here. It wasn't violent rain, no lightning tearing the sky open, but steady, endless, like a slow exhale that filled every corner. The kind of rain that blurred the line between the living and the memory of things long gone. She'd meant to sleep early, but sleep refused her. The photographs still lay on the table where she'd left them, their damp edges curling slightly as if reacting to the air around them. She couldn't bring herself to put them away. Every time she looked at them, she saw something new, a shadow, a turn of the head, the faint outline of another figure standing too close. She told herself it was the light. Just the light and the exhaustion. The sound of the rain deepened. She could hear it moving through the roof, along the gutters, dripping into the ground below. The house answered with its own voice, wood stretching, old pipes sighing, the steady rhythm of a structure remembering its shape. She moved through it like a ghost, her bare feet brushing over cold boards, each step echoed faintly, too faintly, as if the sound were being swallowed before it could return. In the hallway, the mirror caught her as she passed, just a fleeting reflection, distorted by the flicker of the lamp. For a moment, she thought she saw something behind her, the hint of movement in the far corner, but when she turned, the space was still. The light dimmed slightly, the flame bending toward the floor as if drawn downward by breath. She went to the window instead, pulling back the thin curtain. Beyond the glass, the world was a sheet of gray. The trees were only shadows, their branches trembling beneath the rain. The driveway had turned to mud. Somewhere out there, in the dark, the faint outline of the gate stood half open, swaying gently in the wind. She didn't remember leaving it that way. The whisper came so softly she almost missed it. It wasn't a voice so much as the shape of one, a sound that seemed to rise from the walls, from the rain, from the slow pulse of the house itself. Her name, maybe. Or something close to it. She stepped back, holding her breath. The sound didn't come again. Only the rain. She turned down the hall, toward the stairs. The air grew cooler with each step, carrying the faint scent of damp wood and something faintly metallic. When her hand touched the banister, it was slick, as though someone else had already passed this way, leaving traces behind. The boards beneath her feet groaned, deep and tired. She felt the echo travel through her, up her spine. Halfway down, the lamp sputtered, then steadied again, the flame thinning to a pale thread of light. The living room felt different tonight. The photographs still watched her from the table, their edges gleaming faintly in the glow. She moved among them carefully, her shadow stretching across the walls. Outside, the wind pushed harder, rattling the panes, making the entire room seem to breathe. She placed the lamp on the mantel and turned toward the sound she thought she heard, something upstairs. A soft, deliberate shift, like the press of a foot on old wood. She waited. The sound came again. Slow. One step. Then another. It was the attic. Her stomach tightened as the realization settled in. The attic door had always been kept locked when she was a child. Her mother had said it was unsafe, the boards rotten, the beams unstable. But Alara remembered other things too, things whispered about the nights when the door seemed to move on its own, when her mother would stand beneath it, whispering softly, as if speaking to someone inside. She hesitated at the base of the stairs leading up. The air here was colder still, the shadows heavier, the silence between the rain thicker. She lifted the lamp, its flame bending toward the ceiling, and began to climb. Each step felt steeper than it should have been, the air denser. When she reached the top, the narrow hallway stretched ahead, swallowed by darkness. The attic door waited at the end, its paint cracked, its handle dull with age. As she approached, the whisper returned, faint at first, like wind pressing through wood. But no, this was closer, lower, almost human. She stopped. The sound slipped away. Then the house groaned, long and low, as though something deep within it had shifted. The handle of the attic door trembled lightly. Just once. Alara's throat felt dry. She reached out, her fingers hovering just above the metal. The air around it felt wrong, cold, yes, but alive somehow, like the space itself was aware of her presence. She let her hand fall away and took a step back. A draft slipped down the stairwell behind her, stirring the flame of the lamp. It flickered hard, almost went out. Something creaked inside the attic. The sound was unmistakable, movement. Slow, careful, like someone shifting their weight on old boards. It wasn't the house this time. The rhythm was too measured, too deliberate. She found herself staring at the narrow gap beneath the door. The darkness there looked thicker, pulsing faintly with shadow. For a moment, she thought she saw the faint outline of fingers curl against it from the other side. Then nothing. Her breath caught. The rain outside intensified, slamming against the roof, drowning out every smaller sound. The door remained still, silent, ordinary. She backed down one step, then another. The lamp's light trembled along the walls, making her shadow stretch impossibly long. When she reached the landing, she stopped again, listening. The whisper came one last time, clearer now, closer, spoken not through walls or rain, but through the air itself, barely above a breath. Ilara. She turned sharply toward the sound, the lamp jerking in her hand. The flame flared and dimmed again, and for the briefest instant, she thought she saw something reflected in the brass handle of the attic door, a pale shape, a face, not her own. Then the light steadied, and the reflection was gone. She stood there for a long while, unable to move, the rain crashing above her like an ocean pressing down on the roof. The house creaked once more, deep in its bones, and settled. The whisper did not return. Only the sound of the storm remained. When she finally turned away, the flame in her lamp was nearly spent. The stairs moaned beneath her steps as she descended, the air thick with the scent of damp wood and something faintly electric. In the living room, the photographs still lay scattered, and as she passed them, one slipped free from the pile, falling softly to the floor. She didn't notice. But if she had, she would have seen the image had changed. Two girls stood in the photograph now, side by side in the dim hallway. The lamp between them glowed faintly, casting their shadows long across the floor. One of the girls stared straight ahead, eyes wide and uncertain. The other, standing just behind her, was smiling. The house had been empty for years, or at least that's what everyone said. From the road, it looked like a forgotten relic, its roof caved slightly on one side, the windows blind with grime, the porch sinking into the wet earth beneath. Tonight, the rain came heavier than it had in months, a cold, deliberate downpour that seemed to wash the world of sound except for its own hollow rhythm. The air smelled of rotting leaves and rust. Inside, the silence was thick, broken only by the faint groaning of timber that shifted beneath the weight of time. The door stood open by an inch, as if something had gone in long ago and never bothered to leave. The floorboards were slick with damp. Every step echoed like a memory. The light from outside barely reached past the threshold, the storm filtering through the cracked glass and swollen wood. In the far corner of the hall, there was a coat rack. It leaned to one side, burdened by a single, dark overcoat. Rainwater dripped from its hem, pooling on the warped floor, though no one had entered in years. The air hung heavy, the way it does before thunder speaks, when the world seems to hold its breath. A clock ticked somewhere in the walls. Not a gentle, rhythmic tick, but a stuttering one, as though each second struggled to arrive, choking on its own arrival. The sound drew closer the longer one listened, and the mind began to fill in what the eyes could not. The faint impression of movement at the top of the stairs. The whisper of cloth brushing along the railing. The sense that the air itself was thinking, remembering. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, curling like dead skin. Underneath, faint words were scrawled into the plaster, too old to read clearly, too deliberate to be accidental. A child's hand, perhaps. Or someone trying to mark the passage of nights. Rain slid down the windows in silver threads, distorting the blackness outside. Each flash of lightning stretched the shadows thin and brittle, and for a heartbeat, the hallway seemed full of things that didn't breathe but were waiting all the same. The stairs complained as the weight of time pressed down. Every step felt uncertain, like walking into a place that might decide to swallow you whole if you stayed too long. The air grew colder with each ascent, as though warmth itself refused to climb any higher. Halfway up, a framed photograph hung crooked. It showed a family, father, mother, 2 children, posed stiffly in front of the same house decades ago. The glass was cracked down the center, dividing the mother's face perfectly in two. Her eyes, though faded, seemed almost aware. The upper floor was darker. The roof leaked in small, steady drips that tapped against metal and fabric somewhere unseen. The corridor stretched long and narrow, lined with closed doors. Behind one of them, faint humming. A woman's voice, low, tuneless, without words. It stopped whenever the listener did, resuming only when footsteps dared to move again. There was no electricity in the house. No source for the hum. But it lingered, threading through the walls like breath through a sleeping mouth. At the end of the corridor, a single window looked out onto the overgrown garden. The glass trembled with each gust of wind. Beyond it, the trees swayed like tall, mourning figures, their branches scraping against one another with a sound like whispering teeth. The storm outside roared, but here, it was distant, muffled, like listening to rain through a grave's worth of dirt. Something shifted inside the room nearest the window. A soft drag, like fabric across the floor. Then stillness again. The door was ajar, just slightly, enough for the smell to escape. Damp earth, old dust, something metallic underneath. Inside, the faint outline of furniture loomed through the dark, a bed collapsed in on itself, a mirror propped against the wall, covered by a sheet that trembled as if breathing. On the vanity sat a small music box. Its lid was open. Its mechanism turned slowly, though no hand touched it, no spring wounded. The melody was broken, a few high notes repeated endlessly, one of them stuck, warping into a soft mechanical sigh. In the mirror's reflection, the room appeared whole again, curtains intact, furniture upright, a faint glow of life. For a moment, it was beautiful. Then lightning flashed, and the illusion cracked like glass underfoot. The bed was empty, the mirror clouded, and the music box stopped without warning. Only the sound of water dripping remained, steady and patient. Somewhere below, the front door creaked wider, as though answering an invitation that had never been spoken. The wind followed, pushing its cold fingers through the rooms, stirring papers that hadn't moved in decades. A whisper rose, faint, shapeless, but full of longing. It carried up the stairwell, brushing past the walls that had listened for too long. The whisper seemed to form a word, but it broke apart before meaning could take shape, leaving only the rhythm of rain and wood. The clock ticked again, slower now, every beat sounding like it might be the last. A faint trail of wet footprints appeared along the hallway, fading almost as quickly as they formed. They led not away from the door, but toward it, backward, as if retracing steps long forgotten. At the bottom of the stairs, the coat still dripped. But now, beneath it, a small puddle spread wider, rippling with each fall of water from above. It wasn't rain anymore. It was thicker, darker. Outside, the storm began to ease, but the quiet it left behind was worse. The air settled, heavy and unmoving, as though even sound refused to disturb what lingered here. The house no longer felt abandoned. It felt attentive, aware of the space it held, the breaths it borrowed. Somewhere in the darkness, the clock gave one final tick and fell silent. And then came the sound of the floorboards above, slow, deliberate steps pacing from one end of the hall to the other. Wood strained under their weight, dust shivered loose from the ceiling. The steps paused near the top of the stairs, the boards long enough to creak beneath something unseen. A moment of waiting stretched thin. Then, faintly, a sigh. Not from a throat, but from the house itself, old, weary, and still unwilling to let go. The rain started again, gentler now, tapping against the windows like fingertips. The puddle by the coat had vanished, though the air still smelled faintly of iron. And for a brief moment, the whole place seemed to breathe in rhythm with the rain, the wood expanding, the walls murmuring, the shadows leaning closer. Then, silence. Only the faint hum remained, rising once more from within the walls, that same low, tuneless sound. It was no longer a woman's voice. It was something deeper, older, the echo of a promise that had never been kept. And if you stood long enough to listen, really listen, you could almost hear it forming words again, just beneath the breath of the storm. The rain had started before dusk, a fine mist at first, soft and quiet, clinging to the windows like breath on glass. By nightfall, it had deepened into a steady downpour, drumming against the roof in a slow, rhythmic pulse, the sound of something ancient and patient. The old farmhouse stood at the edge of the woods, far from the road, where no streetlights reached and the air smelled of damp soil and decay. Its walls, swollen with age, seemed to absorb the rain rather than repel it. The wood moaned now and then, as if remembering the years it had been alive, the trees it once was. Inside, shadows swayed with the flicker of candlelight, stretching long across the floor like dark veins. The room was cold, though the fire had been lit hours ago. Its flame burned weakly, fighting a losing battle against the damp that crept in through cracks and unseen seams. Every gust of wind outside pushed against the walls with a low groan, and the windows trembled, their rattling becoming part of the storm's language. A single chair faced the hearth, its cushion sagging with use. Behind it, the rest of the room was swallowed by gloom. The air smelled faintly of smoke, rain, and something else, something metallic, faint but persistent, like rust or old blood. The sound of dripping came from somewhere in the ceiling. Each drop landed with perfect precision into a small metal basin left on the floor. 1, 2, 3. It was steady, unbroken, a slow reminder of the passage of time. Above, the beams creaked. The kind of sound a house makes when it's been alone too long, when its silence begins to fill with things that don't belong to the living. The shadows shifted again. Near the window, a figure stood, still, almost part of the darkness itself. The candlelight bent around it but never touched it. For a while, it didn't move, didn't even breathe. The rain made it difficult to tell whether what stood there was real or just a trick of light through warped glass. Then, softly, the faintest movement, a tilt of the head, a shift in the weight of the shadow. The floor whispered underfoot, wood groaning as if it recognized the presence. The figure's outline shimmered faintly, like breath fogging against cold air. Somewhere in the back of the house, a door clicked open on its own. The sound was subtle, almost delicate, like an invitation. The wind moved through the hallway beyond, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and wet leaves. The candle flickered violently, its flame thinning, stretching tall, then shrinking again. For a moment, the entire house seemed to breathe in, and then hold it. In the hallway, the floorboards sagged under invisible steps. Each one slower than the last. The dripping sound above ceased, replaced by a new rhythm, softer, uneven, like fingers brushing the wall. The air changed. It thickened, heavy with memory. Faint traces of something old lingered, perfume, perhaps, long faded but not forgotten. The kind that clings to fabric and refuses to leave. Lightning flared through the window, illuminating the stairwell for a single, merciless instant. On the landing, where the wallpaper had peeled away in strips, there was a handprint. Dark. Damp. Smudged into the plaster as if pressed there recently. When the light faded, the spot seemed darker than before, as though it absorbed what little glow was left in the room. The wind howled through a gap in the roof, the sound bending into something almost human. A long, low moan that threaded through the corridors and settled deep within the house's bones. Then came the faint sound of humming, a lullaby, fragile and distant. It rose and fell with the rain, repeating itself as though it had never stopped. The voice was soft, but it carried weight, the kind that belongs to memory rather than flesh. In the parlor, the candle went out. The darkness that followed wasn't empty, it was thick, alive. The fire in the hearth flickered once, twice, then dimmed to embers. In that dim light, the outline of the chair moved. Just slightly. As if someone had settled into it, the old wood sighing under a remembered weight. The air trembled, the rain outside pausing for a heartbeat, as if the world itself waited. Then came the faint creak of a rocking motion, slow, methodical. The chair, unseen in the half-light, moved just enough for the sound to echo. The rhythm matched the rain, steady and patient. Rocking. Waiting. Listening. The scent in the air grew stronger, sharp now, unmistakable. The same metallic tang that lingered near the basin below. The dripping resumed, but this time it wasn't from the ceiling. It came from somewhere closer. The sound of liquid finding wood, soaking into it. The lullaby stopped. The rocking continued. Outside, the wind carried whispers against the windowpane, words too faint to understand, too desperate to ignore. They pressed against the glass like pleading hands, their rhythm out of sync with the storm. Each gust seemed to carry voices from the trees beyond, the kind that remembered names, faces, promises unkept. Upstairs, another door moved. A slow, dragging hinge. Something walked along the upper corridor now, its steps uneven, hesitant. Every few paces, the boards groaned louder, as if resisting. The humming began again, this time clearer, closer. A woman's voice. Low. Soft. A tune older than the house itself. The sound drifted down the stairwell, wrapping around the silence below. The rocking stopped. The air seemed to shift backward, drawing breath from every corner of the room. A faint warmth bloomed near the hearth, a whisper of heat, almost human. The faint outline of hands could be seen reflected in the glass above the fire, not attached to any body, just hovering, fingers curled slightly, trembling as if caught between longing and fear. They faded when lightning flashed again, leaving behind the faint impression of movement in the dark. The storm began to thin, its rage dissolving into a tired drizzle. But inside, the sound of water persisted, slow and deliberate. From the hallway, a faint trail of moisture led toward the chair, each drop darker than rain should be. The basin in the corner had overflowed, its contents seeping into the floorboards, tracing lines toward the fire. The wood drank it eagerly, darkening where it spread. Somewhere beyond the walls, the forest exhaled. The trees swayed one last time, their branches whispering secrets back to the wind. Inside, the air settled again, but not in peace. It was the stillness of something watching, waiting. The kind of silence that doesn't end, only deepens. The fire gave one final crack, and for a moment, the light rose just enough to reveal what sat in the chair. Not clearly, never clearly, but enough to see the curve of a head, the shape of a hand resting against worn fabric. Then darkness swallowed it again. The rain outside fell harder, as if to cover what it had just allowed to be seen. In the end, only the sound of creaking wood remained, the house shifting, breathing, remembering. The storm carried on. The dripping slowed. And somewhere within the walls, the humming began again, quieter this time, as though it had found what it was waiting for and was now singing it to sleep. The rain had softened by morning, but the world still felt drowned in gray. A thin fog clung to the earth like something reluctant to let go, curling through the bare trees and the rusted fence that marked the edge of the property. The house behind her loomed in silence, its windows dark, unblinking. Ilara stood by the gate, the umbrella useless at her side, water collecting on her hair and rolling down her face in slow, uneven trails. The road before her stretched into the distance, vanishing into the mist, and somewhere along it lay the neighbor's cottage, the one she had seen a faint light in last night. It wasn't curiosity that led her there. It was the need to hear something human, something that belonged to this world and not the one whispering inside her walls. The night before had changed the house. She could feel it breathing when she tried to sleep, a shallow, uneven rhythm beneath the floorboards, as though something beneath her room had lungs. Now, as she walked, her boots sinking slightly into the soaked earth, she could still hear the echo of that faint breathing. The path wound between the trees, the rain dripping from their bare branches in uneven patterns, like the ticking of a broken clock. The wind was mild, but it carried with it the sound of something that wasn't quite the rain, a faint melody, or maybe a voice, threading through the fog. Elara stopped once, listening. Nothing but the dull, steady heartbeat of droplets hitting the ground. And yet, for a moment, she could have sworn she heard her name. When she reached the neighbor's house, the world seemed even quieter. The cottage was small and crooked, its roof sagging slightly in the middle, its chimney long cold. A single lantern burned in the window, its flame trembling with every shift of the wind. The door was ajar, and inside came the faint smell of damp wood and smoke that had long settled into the walls. She hesitated before stepping closer, her boots crunching against the gravel. The old woman sat near the window, wrapped in a heavy shawl, her eyes fixed on the rain outside. Her presence felt like something that had always been there, as if the fog had carved her shape out of itself and left her to keep watch. When she spoke, her voice was low, almost part of the wind itself. She said she remembered Elara's family. Everyone in the valley did. The mother, quiet and strange. The daughter, always seen near the woods, talking to someone no one else could see. And then, after one night of terrible thunder, only one remained. Elara didn't interrupt. She couldn't. Her throat had tightened the moment the woman mentioned her mother's name, the sound of it dragging old memories to the surface, the way her mother would hum when it rained, the way she'd lock certain doors after sunset. The woman spoke slowly, her eyes never leaving the window. She said there had been two of them once, twin girls, born under a storm that split the night in half. One cried louder than the other, and the mother had whispered, only one was meant to stay. The candle on the table flickered. A soft draft moved through the room, but the door hadn't opened. The old woman didn't seem to notice. Her fingers traced small circles against the rim of her teacup, her gaze unfocused. She said the villagers used to hear laughter from the woods, two voices, the same pitch, same tone, twining around each other like wind through branches. But one day, that laughter stopped. Only one voice remained. Elara's hands were shaking, though she couldn't tell if it was from cold or something older. The words settled in her like stones. A twin. The photograph. The whisper in the attic. The locked door. The truth sat just out of reach, a shape she could see only through fog, shifting each time she tried to grasp it. She wanted to ask questions, how, why, when, but her tongue felt heavy, her chest hollow. The old woman turned to her then, slowly, her eyes sharp despite the dimness of the room. She said something Elara didn't quite hear, a name, perhaps. A name that felt familiar in the strangest way, echoing somewhere deep inside her mind. When the woman repeated it, the sound was softer, almost tender. It was her own. But not the one she used now. It was another name, the one her mother used only in dreams she could never fully remember. The sound of rain intensified against the window, as if the storm had leaned closer to listen. The old woman's voice began to tremble as she spoke, her words breaking apart like brittle leaves. She said the mother had been seen digging in the garden that night, her hands covered in mud, her hair unbound. The storm had hidden her cries, but those who watched from afar said she spoke to the earth as though it were answering her. And when morning came, only one child remained, and the ground behind the house was smoother than before. Elara felt her breath catch. The air had changed again, heavy, metallic. The candle sputtered, its flame stretching thin. Somewhere behind her, the floorboards creaked. The sound came again, deliberate, waited. The old woman froze, her eyes darting past Elara's shoulder. For a moment, neither of them moved. The room had grown colder, the kind of cold that doesn't come from weather. The door behind her stood slightly open now, the wind pushing it with a faint, rhythmic sound, knock, pause, knock. When she turned back, the old woman's eyes had lost their focus, staring into something Elara couldn't see. Her lips moved, barely. One word, repeated, quieter each time. The same name again. The one Elara didn't remember ever having. The sound of rain blurred into static. The light from the candle twisted, bending shadows into unfamiliar shapes across the wall. For a moment, one of them looked like a child's, small, slight, standing just behind her shoulder. The old woman's teacup tipped and rolled onto the floor, spilling dark liquid that crawled between the cracks of the wood. The shadow didn't move. Neither did Alara. The fog outside pressed itself against the glass, thick and white, hiding the world beyond the window. The sound of the storm dulled to a heartbeat, slow and heavy. Alara could feel the pulse of it beneath her feet. The house seemed to lean forward, listening. She stepped back without meaning to, her heel brushing against the threshold. The cold reached her bones. The old woman whispered something again, but her voice was so faint now it was almost gone. Alara didn't understand the words, they came from another time, another tongue. But she could feel their weight. A warning. A remembrance. Or maybe a welcome. When she stepped outside, the air felt thick, unsteady. The fog swirled around her legs, alive with motion, curling in on itself like smoke. The path back to her house had disappeared, the world now only shapes in gray. Behind her, the cottage door shut softly, though she hadn't touched it. She could still see the flicker of the candle through the window, trembling like a trapped soul. She stood there for a long time, listening. Somewhere in the fog, just beyond sight, came the faint sound of a child humming, off-key, distant, but achingly familiar. The tune her mother used to hum when the thunder rolled, when the power went out, when she whispered to the dark corners of the house. Alara's chest tightened. Her hand trembled. She turned toward the sound. And the fog moved with her, as if it had been waiting. The house was quieter that night, but not peaceful. Quiet in the way a held breath is quiet, expectant, tense, trembling just beneath the surface. Outside, the rain had ceased for the first time in days, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt unnatural. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and rotting leaves, the kind that seeps into the walls and never leaves. Alara sat by the hearth, her fingers wrapped around a cup of untouched tea gone cold hours ago. The faint orange glow of the fire flickered weakly, barely strong enough to cast light on her face. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. The story the old woman told her lingered like smoke in her mind, the twin that wasn't meant to live, the mother's midnight digging, the silence that followed. The house felt different now. She noticed small things she hadn't before, faint scratches along the hallway walls, places where the wallpaper had bubbled and peeled away, revealing words scrawled beneath in a trembling hand. She hadn't written them. Yet some were signed with her name. The air in certain rooms carried a chill even the fire couldn't fight. She'd wake to the sound of breathing near her door, soft, shallow, almost childlike, but when she called out, there would be nothing. Just the walls, answering in the language of old wood and shifting nails. The attic still called to her. It always had. The house seemed to tilt toward it, as though gravity itself had a memory. Every night, the faintest sound would come from above, a dragging noise, the creak of something shifting weight. She told herself it was the house settling, but there was rhythm in it. A purpose. And in that rhythm, a pattern, like someone pacing. That evening, the wind returned, low and restless. It moved through the corridors with a whisper, stirring the curtains, carrying the smell of the rain-soaked world outside. The fire sputtered, then rose again. Shadows danced across the ceiling, long and uncertain. Alara's eyes were drawn upward. The ceiling above her bedroom had a thin crack running from one end to the other, the kind that deepens with time but never quite breaks. She could hear something behind it, faint scratching, like nails against wood. When she finally climbed the stairs, the house groaned beneath her, its sound sharper in the silence. Each step echoed as though she were walking into a place that had been waiting for her. The air grew colder near the top, and the faint smell of mold mixed with something sweeter, the scent of flowers long dead, dried petals perhaps, hidden away and forgotten. The attic door stood at the end of the corridor, its paint peeling in curled strips. She remembered it always being locked, but now, it was slightly open, the darkness behind it like a held secret. Elara paused, hand trembling against the knob. The silence up there was different, deeper, as though the air itself resisted sound. When she pushed the door, it swung open with a long, aching creak that seemed to echo forever. The attic was a skeleton of its former self, beams of rotting wood, dust swirling in the faint silver of moonlight leaking through the broken window. Cobwebs hung like curtains, swaying gently in the drafts. But the space felt smaller than she remembered, as if the walls had crept inward over the years, closing around whatever they were trying to keep inside. The floor groaned beneath her feet as she stepped inside. Her light flickered across old trunks, covered in fabric eaten through by time. The smell of mildew clung to everything. In the far corner, where the slanted roof pressed close to the floor, she noticed something strange, a wall that didn't match the others. Its boards were newer, cleaner, unscarred by age. She ran her hand over it. Cold. Smooth. Wrong. The wood was too tightly fitted, too deliberate. Someone had sealed something behind it. A memory stirred, faint and fragmented, her mother's voice, hushed, telling her never to come up here at night. The way she'd always keep the key hidden, and how she'd sometimes come down from the attic with dirt on her hands and eyes that looked like she'd seen a ghost. The air thickened as Elara knelt near the false wall. The faint sound of movement came from behind it, not loud, not clear, but present. Something alive. Or something that wanted to be. She found the edge of one of the planks and began to pry. The wood resisted at first, nails groaning, dust spilling down around her. When the first board gave way, the smell that came through was suffocating, a stale mix of damp, earth, and decay. She coughed, her eyes watering, but she kept going. One by one, the boards came loose, revealing darkness beyond. She shone her light into the gap. A small room. Or what had once been one. The walls were covered in faint drawings, crude shapes, circles, stick figures. Two of them always stood side by side, one larger, one smaller. In some, they were holding hands. In others, one was alone, surrounded by scribbled black marks, heavy and frantic. Against the far wall, a bed, small, child-sized, its sheets stained and torn. Above it, a mirror cracked across its face like a spider's web. And beside the bed, something else. A shape hunched in the corner. Pale. Fragile. Elara froze, her breath caught somewhere in her throat. The air in the hidden room seemed to shiver, bending around the figure as if unsure whether it should be seen. Her light flickered again, the shadows shifting. The shape didn't move, but its outline pulsed faintly, like heat rising from the ground on a cold day. She could feel it now, something between presence and memory, watching her from that space where the dead linger before they're ready to leave. The silence was unbearable. The world seemed to have stopped. No wind, no rain, no sound but her heartbeat, uneven and fragile. Then, faintly, from within the walls, came the sound of breathing, shallow, uneven, childlike. She stepped closer, unable to stop herself. Her hand brushed the cracked mirror, and the reflection that looked back at her wasn't hers. The girl in the glass had her eyes, her mouth, her hair, but not her expression. The face that stared back was colder, hollow, something not entirely human. For a moment, the air around the mirror rippled, as though reality itself resisted the image. Then came a whisper, faint and low, almost gentle. It wasn't in words, but she felt it all the same. Recognition. Resentment. Need. The air shifted. The faint sound of footsteps moved behind her, though she hadn't turned. The board she had pried away began to tremble against the floor, the sound like bones settling. The mirror fogged slightly, as if someone had breathed on the other side of it. Elara stepped back, her light trembling in her hand. The shadow in the corner was gone. In its place, only the faint impression of small footprints, dark against the dusty floorboards, leading toward where she stood. Each one slower than the last, until they stopped just before her. The cold deepened. Her reflection blinked once, not her, but the other, and for a moment, both faces overlapped in the glass. Then the light died completely. The house groaned. Somewhere below, the front door opened by itself, the wind carrying whispers up the stairwell. They sounded almost like laughter, faint, familiar, impossibly young. Ilara's breath came slow and shallow, her body unmoving in the dark. Behind her, the boards she'd removed began to shift again, one by one, as if something was closing the wall back up from the inside. The storm had not stopped for 3 nights. It moved like a living thing across the valley, slow, deliberate, filled with a kind of patient malice that seeped into every wall, every bone, every dream. Inside the cabin, the air was damp, heavy with the scent of rot and wet wood. Every drop that struck the tin roof sounded slower than it should have, echoing longer, as if time itself had decided to crawl. Amelia sat near the old window, her reflection rippling in the glass whenever the wind pushed against the frame. Her eyes, once tired, now seemed hollow, staring at something far beyond the storm, something only she could sense. It had been days since the strange noises began, soft at first, like the shifting of furniture in another room. But each night they grew more deliberate, closer, until last night, when the sound came from directly behind her. She had turned slowly, breath trembling in her throat, and found the old chair rocking by itself in the dark. No breeze. No reason. Just a rhythm, slow, patient, and wrong. She hadn't touched that chair since her husband's death. He used to sit there, writing by the dim glow of a lantern, whispering his thoughts to the paper when he thought she was asleep. She could almost hear the scrape of his pen again, the soft muttering of words unfinished, trapped between memory and madness. The wind pressed against the door like an animal trying to get in. The fire had long gone out, leaving only the faint smell of smoke and damp ash. The darkness around her seemed thicker now, the edges of the room dissolving into a gray haze where the walls used to be. Sometimes she thought she saw movement there, the slow shifting of something pale. Not quite light. Not quite shadow. It would fade whenever she looked directly at it, as though it knew her eyes and waited for them to turn away. She hadn't slept in over 30 hours, afraid of what the dark might hold when her mind slipped away. The house seemed to breathe when she closed her eyes. She could feel it, the boards creaking like ribs, the roof groaning with the slow weight of water, the soft whisper from the chimney that sometimes sounded like her name. Tonight felt different. There was something sharper in the air, colder than before. She could feel it pressing against her skin, not wind, but presence. She stood up slowly, each step across the floor releasing a faint groan of wood beneath her bare feet. The lantern on the table flickered once, twice, and then steadied, casting trembling shadows along the walls. She looked at the chair again. It was still now. Completely still. But on the small table beside it, there was something new, a wet handprint, faint but clear, spreading slowly across the wood like ink. The shape was unmistakable. Her husband's. Amelia didn't move for a long time. Her heartbeat seemed to fill the entire cabin, loud and uneven. The handprint was fresh, still dripping faintly. She should have screamed, should have run, but there was something oddly tender in the sight of it, something familiar and cruelly comforting. He had built that table for her. His initials were carved into the underside. She knelt down, trembling, and touched the mark with her fingertips. It was cold, impossibly cold, like touching the surface of deep water. For a moment, her eyes closed. She remembered the day he drowned, the way the river had swallowed him, the silence afterward, the absence that hung heavier than grief itself. The storm that night had been much like this one. She had felt him slip away before they even found his body. A faint whisper broke the stillness. It came from somewhere near the window, fragile, almost indistinguishable from the sound of rain. She turned her head, every muscle rigid, listening. The voice was slow, distorted by the hum of the storm, a single word repeated again and again. She couldn't understand it, not fully, but the tone was pleading, distant, like someone calling from underwater. The lantern flickered again. She took a step toward the sound, one hand outstretched as if the air itself might guide her. The floorboards groaned in warning, but she didn't stop. Outside, the world was nothing but mist and rain. The trees were little more than black smudges, bending under the wind. She leaned closer to the glass, and for the briefest instant, she saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the woods. Still. Watching. Its shape blurred by the downpour, but its head tilted in that same familiar way her husband used to when listening. Her breath fogged the glass. The figure did not move. Only the rain moved around it, as though it were untouched by the storm entirely. She whispered his name, barely a breath, barely sound. The figure's head lifted slightly. Then, as lightning split the sky, it was gone. She stumbled back from the window, heart slamming against her ribs. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker, as though the cabin itself had inhaled and was waiting to exhale. Then came the sound again, this time inside. A soft dripping, steady and deliberate, coming from the chair. She turned toward it, dread crawling through her veins. The handprint had spread, running down the leg of the table and pooling onto the floor. But it wasn't water. It was darker. Thicker. Her knees gave out as she stepped closer. In the dim light, she could see it, a faint outline forming in the chair, like a shape burned into the air. The whisper came again, clearer now, close enough that she could feel the breath of it brush her ear. "You left me." She froze. The voice wasn't angry. It was sad. Almost broken. A chill moved through her spine, a slow, creeping ache that felt like memory taking form. Tears welled in her eyes before she realized they had come. "I didn't," she mouthed, though no sound came. The room seemed to lean closer, every wall listening. The whisper turned to a faint rustle, papers moving, drawers opening, the sound of things rearranging themselves without hands. And then the lantern went out. Darkness rushed in, thick as smoke. She could still hear the dripping, but now it was coming from above her, from the ceiling, each drop landing just beside her shoulder. She didn't dare look up. Somewhere in the dark, the chair creaked again. Once. Twice. Then silence. The storm outside continued, relentless. And through the rhythm of rain and thunder, she heard it again, a heartbeat. Not hers. Slow, heavy, echoing from inside the walls. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, trying to find her own rhythm beneath it. But there was nothing. Only the heartbeat that did not belong to her, growing louder, closer, until it filled the air completely. In that moment, she realized something she could not unfeel, that grief had not haunted this house. It had been invited in. It had waited, patient and kind, feeding on her guilt, her longing, her sleepless hours. And now, it had taken shape. The whispers, the wet prints, the voice calling through the rain, they were not his ghost. They were hers. The part of her that had refused to let go. The heartbeat faded slowly, dissolving into the sound of rain. The lantern flickered back to life on its own. The chair was empty again. But where the handprint had been, there was now nothing, just clean, dry wood, as if it had never been touched. The only proof of what had happened was the faint, cold mist that lingered in the air, and the whisper that brushed her ear one last time before vanishing into the storm, "You never left me." And as she stood there, trembling, she realized she hadn't. Not really. The storm had weakened by dawn, but its silence carried a weight that was worse than thunder. The rain had stopped falling, yet drops still clung to every surface, gathering and sliding down in slow motion, like the house itself was weeping. The sky remained gray, an endless sheet of ash that refused to lift. Amelia stood by the doorway, her eyes swollen from sleeplessness. The cold air from outside brushed against her skin like fingers tracing old scars. Inside, the floorboards still glistened with moisture. She hadn't noticed before how every plank bowed slightly, as though burdened by something beneath. She told herself it was the water. But deep down, she knew better. The chair was gone. The one that had rocked on its own, whispered into her nights, vanished. In its place, a hollow square of dust marked where it had been for years. She stood there for a long time, staring at that empty patch as if it might breathe. The fire had long gone out, leaving the room faintly scented of iron and smoke. Every object in the cabin seemed wrong now, displaced by invisible hands. The clock on the mantel ticked irregularly, a weak, stuttering sound that came only when she wasn't looking at it. She had tried leaving once, just before dawn. The moment she stepped onto the porch, the forest ahead had felt impossibly vast, every branch slick with rain, every path swallowed in fog. She couldn't even see the old bridge that led toward the road. The trees pressed in close, their bark dark and glistening like wet skin. Then, from somewhere among them, a voice, faint, tender, and impossible, called her name. The same voice that used to hum softly beside her as she fell asleep. It came not from one direction, but all around, threading through the trees, curling into her like smoke. She dropped her lantern and stumbled back inside before realizing her face was wet, not from the rain. Now, the cabin felt tighter than ever. She moved slowly through the rooms, barefoot, her nightdress clinging to her legs. In every mirror, her reflection seemed slightly off, the eyes just a little too slow to follow, the lips faintly parted even when hers were not. Once, she caught a flicker of movement behind her shoulder in the glass, but when she turned, the hallway was empty except for the faint shape of condensation forming a handprint against the window. By evening, the light turned the color of bruised gold. Shadows stretched long and uncertain, bending across the ceiling like something breathing above her. She found herself drawn toward the back room, the one she hadn't entered since his funeral. The door was swollen from moisture, and it took effort to push it open. A stale, cold air spilled out, carrying with it the faint smell of river water. Inside, his things remained exactly as he'd left them, books stacked neatly by the bed, boots by the wall, his old coat still hanging, untouched. She hesitated before stepping in. The air was different here, heavier, expectant. As she crossed the threshold, the floor groaned, deep and low, like the sound of a body shifting beneath the boards. Her breath clouded in front of her, though the air was not cold enough for that. She looked toward the writing desk, the one with the small drawer that had always been locked. A strange impulse pulled her closer. The drawer that never opened now sat slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness peeking through. She reached for it with trembling fingers and pulled. Inside lay a single folded paper, stained at the edges, and beneath it, something that looked like a river pebble, smooth, dark, and faintly warm. She unfolded the paper carefully, each motion sounding too loud in the still room. The handwriting was his, uneven, hurried, filled with the same desperation she'd once seen in his eyes before he disappeared into the storm. "If you find this," it read, *, "don't follow the voice. It isn't me. It never was. *" Her knees weakened. She read it again, slower, her heart beating so hard it seemed to shake the words. The pebble in her other hand pulsed faintly, or perhaps that was just the echo of her own pulse. But when she set it down, it moved. Only slightly, rolling toward the edge of the desk, stopping just before falling. She backed away, eyes locked on it. The air seemed to bend around that tiny object, the edges of the room warping faintly as if heat shimmered there. And then, a whisper, low, almost intimate, drifted from behind her. It said her name again, not in the pleading tone of the forest, but in something darker. Accusing. Close enough that she could feel its breath. She turned slowly. The door she had left open was now closed. Her throat tightened. A soft tapping began, rhythmic and steady, from inside the walls, like something with fingers feeling its way toward her. She pressed a hand against the wood, her palm meeting something damp and pulsing faintly. The tapping stopped. Then a sound replaced it, the unmistakable scrape of something dragging across the floorboards, just beneath her feet. The lantern flickered violently. Her shadow stretched across the far wall, long and trembling, but when she moved, it didn't. It stood still, watching. Then, slowly, it began to move on its own. It lifted an arm, fingers curling as though reaching for her, even as she stood frozen, her own arm motionless at her side. The lantern died. Darkness swallowed the room whole. The scraping beneath her grew louder, now accompanied by a wet sound, as though something were trying to crawl its way up through the cracks. She backed away, stumbled, her heel catching on the rug. Her hand brushed against the desk again, and in that instant, something cold and slick coiled around her ankle. Not tight, not pulling, just a touch. Testing. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her body shaking as she felt it trace the outline of her skin. When she found the courage to look down, there was nothing there. But the floorboards were swelling now, bulging upward like something pressing from beneath. A faint voice, his voice, whispered from below. The same rhythm. The same tenderness. You shouldn't have stayed. Her vision blurred with tears. Then why can't I leave? She whispered back into the dark, her voice cracking. The room answered not with words, but with a slow creak, deep and resonant, as the boards beneath her feet split slightly. A pale mist seeped through the cracks, glowing faintly with the color of moonlight. Inside it, something moved, slow, deliberate, taking shape. She fell back against the wall, eyes wide, heart collapsing into itself. The shape that rose from the mist wasn't his. Not exactly. It had his eyes, but not his warmth. His mouth, but not his breath. It stood silently, head tilted just like the figure in the rain had. The mist around it pulsed faintly with every wordless breath it took. Then, in a voice that was both his and not his, it whispered, "You heard me anyway." Her body refused to move. The shape reached forward, its hand forming from the mist, trembling, half solid, half void. She could see right through it, through the spaces where light bent wrong. The fingers brushed against her face, cold enough to burn. For a moment, she felt everything at once, grief, longing, guilt, all tangled together into something unrecognizable. And then, as the mist receded, as the thing dissolved back into the cracks in the floor, she realized her tears were no longer warm. The silence that followed was unbearable. No wind. No rain. Just the faint ticking of the broken clock. She stayed there for what felt like hours, listening to her own shallow breathing. When she finally looked up, the note on the desk was gone. The pebble, too. Only a faint, damp handprint remained where her palm had touched the wood. It was not hers. And outside, in the distance where the forest met the fog, a voice began to call her name again, softer this time, almost tender. But now she knew what it was. And still, she listened. The last night came quietly. No storm, no wind, no sound of rain on the glass. Just a stillness that felt heavy enough to press against the lungs. The forest outside had gone colorless, a smear of black and gray under a pale, restless moon. The air inside the cabin was colder now, each breath leaving a ghost of vapor that lingered too long before fading. The walls no longer creaked with age, they pulsed softly, like the slow beat of something alive. Amelia hadn't moved from the floor since dusk. Her candle had burned itself down to a puddle of wax that hardened beside her hand. The air smelled faintly of iron and damp wood. Beneath her palm, the boards were slick, as though the river below the house had risen through the cracks. In her mind, she could still hear the voice. It hadn't spoken for hours, but silence could carry memory louder than words ever could. The note was gone, but she had memorized it, the warning, the plea. Asterisk, it isn't me. It never was, asterisk, she wanted to believe that, but part of her couldn't. She had felt him. She had seen the shadow with his eyes. And when it touched her, she had not recoiled. That was the worst part. Outside, the fog had thickened, swallowing the world beyond the porch. Trees stood like sentinels, motionless, their branches woven together in mourning. The moon blurred and bled pale light through them, turning the forest into something half real, half dream. Somewhere beyond the window, faint ripples of movement stirred the mist. The sound was subtle, the slow shift of something dragging through wet grass. The air hummed, a low frequency that seemed to come from within the floorboards themselves. It vibrated through her bones, through the stillness of her teeth. Then, faintly, the clock on the mantel began ticking again. Not fast. Not rhythmic. Just once every few seconds, like a dying heartbeat refusing to stop. She rose slowly, her body weak, her nightdress damp from the floor. The window beside the desk glowed faintly with that ghostly moonlight. Through it, she could see the outline of the river, or perhaps where the river had once been. Now it looked like a thin line of mercury cutting through the land, shifting, whispering. And in its reflection, there was movement, the suggestion of figures standing along the bank. Still, distant, faceless. Watching the house. She moved closer to the glass, her hand trembling as she wiped the condensation away. The reflection cleared only for a second, and in that second she saw herself, but her reflection was wrong. It didn't copy her movement. It stood still, expressionless, eyes wide and hollow. Her hand froze mid-air. Then the reflection tilted its head. Slowly. Precisely. The same way he used to. The sound of dripping water came again. Not from the ceiling this time, but from behind the walls. It wasn't rain. It was thicker, like the rhythm of something moving downward through old pipes, though there were none. She turned, her breath fogging in front of her, and saw the shape of the door. It was open by an inch, swinging gently with the draft. She could hear something beyond it, a faint, rhythmic scrape, as though fingernails brushed lightly against wood. Not hurried. Patient. She stepped forward, bare feet silent on the boards, and pushed the door open wider. The hall beyond was darker than it should have been, the walls damp and glistening. The air had changed, filled with that smell again, that deep, metallic sweetness that had no place in air meant to breathe. As she walked, the floor felt softer beneath her steps, like earth soaked through. The sound followed her, the whisper of fabric, the faint hum of a lullaby that had no melody. She reached the end of the hall, where the attic stairs waited, the rope cord swaying slightly in the draft. It hadn't moved in years, yet now it quivered as though something above waited for her to pull it. Her hand found the cord. It was damp and cold. She hesitated only for a moment before tugging. The ladder unfolded downward with a hollow groan that echoed through the house. Dust fell in thin streams, settling in her hair like gray snow. The air from above carried a chill, and something else, faint but undeniable, the smell of river water. She climbed slowly, each step a quiet surrender. The higher she rose, the more she felt it, a presence not beside her but within her, threading through her breath, her heartbeat, her thoughts. The attic was dimly lit by the moon spilling through a cracked skylight. It revealed a small, square space cluttered with forgotten things, a trunk, a broken lamp, a scattering of papers yellowed with time. In the center of the room was the rocking chair. It moved gently, though no wind touched it. The sound of its motion was soft but deliberate, the creak of old wood, the sigh of time repeating itself. She took one step closer. Her throat tightened. On the chair rested his coat. Folded neatly. Beneath it, his boots. They were damp, the leather dark and shining as though freshly pulled from water. She wanted to run. To scream. To wake from whatever dream had wrapped itself around her life. But she couldn't. Instead, she stepped closer, drawn as if the air itself had taken her by the wrist. When she reached the chair, she saw it, the small pebble lying atop the coat, the same one she'd found before. Its surface gleamed faintly, pulsing with a dim light that throbbed in rhythm with her heartbeat. And then, a voice, close, low, almost inside her ear. Asterisk, you stayed. Asterisk. Her eyes filled. The words trembled from her lips before she even realized she was speaking. I didn't mean to. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, something shifted behind her. The air thickened. She turned slowly, the lantern light from below barely reaching into the room. And in that half-darkness, she saw him. Or what was left of him. He stood near the wall, his figure flickering faintly like a reflection on moving water. His face was both there and not, his eyes hollow, filled with river light. His skin looked translucent, veins like faint threads beneath glass. He didn't move. But the sound of the rocking chair matched the rhythm of his unseen breath. Amelia's chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. Her voice caught in her throat, trembling. What are you? The shadow tilted its head. And in the faintest whisper, it said, asterisk, what's left when the river forgets to stop. Asterisk. Her tears fell silently, catching the moonlight before disappearing into the boards. The figure stepped forward, the air bending slightly around him. With each step, the sound of water followed, droplets falling from nowhere, pattering against the floor. When he was only a few feet away, the rocking chair stopped. The silence pressed hard. He reached for her, or perhaps the memory of her, his hand hovering inches from her face. She could feel the cold radiate from it, not air, but absence itself. She closed her eyes, and for a fleeting moment, warmth returned. The way it had been before the river took him. Before the house began to breathe. Before the voice had changed. When she opened her eyes again, the attic was empty. The coat remained on the chair. The pebble had turned black. She stood there until the moon faded and dawn returned in a colorless haze. The fog lifted just enough to reveal the river, calm, silent, perfectly still. It looked ordinary now, as though it had never taken anyone, never whispered, never remembered. But the house beneath her feet still pulsed faintly, alive with something too patient to die. As she stepped toward the ladder, the floor creaked softly, once, twice, and then another sound followed, quiet and unmistakable, the rocking chair moving again, slow and steady, though no one sat upon it. The sound followed her down the stairs, through the hall, through the silence that had settled over everything. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall again, soft, deliberate, endless. Each one struck the roof like a heartbeat trying to return. And in that rhythm, faintly, beneath the wind and the water, she heard it once more, his voice, from nowhere and everywhere, humming the unfinished tune that had followed her since the beginning. And she listened, knowing this time it would never stop.